we got a call from American Idol that she had been doing all of her pre-auditions and that they were going to feature her audition on American Idol. And they asked if we wanted to fly ourselves there and be there when she auditioned. And we were like, yes.
Stories That Live in Us is a podcast that inspires you to form deep connections with your family, past, present, and future. I'm Crista Cowan, known online as the Barefoot Genealogist. Counting down to the upcoming celebration of America's 250th birthday, you'll meet families from each state whose stories are woven into the very fabric of America. Tales of immigration, migration, courage, and community that remind us that when we tell our stories, we strengthen the bonds that connect us. So join me for season 2 as we discover from sea to shining sea, the stories that live in us. I have driven through the state of Wyoming countless times. If you take the southern route across I-80, it looks like it's the same for miles, and it gets a little monotonous. But if you go up into Jackson Hole and the Tetons, it is some of the most beautiful land in the country. Wyoming is the cowboy state. And when I think about Wyoming, I think about the Old West, whether it's there up in the Tetons in what is still some of the most rugged land in the country, or if it's driving across the I-80 route between Utah and Nebraska, that is cowboy land. And one of the things I think about when I think about cowboys is the traditions of music. When you think about old cowboys, there's just this image that comes to mind of gathering around the campfire after a long day of ranching and singing music, playing an instrument. Like that just somehow really evokes that memory for me. My guest today is Lindy Nielsen, and she is, among other things, a bit of a musician. And music is part of her family story. And our conversation has some really unique aspects, and it's a fun story that I think you're really going to enjoy. But I'm going to give you a little bit of the moral up front, which is, as we talked, I was really reminded of how much our DNA matters, how much this argument about nurture versus nature comes into play. And when you look at it, it reminds me of Wyoming. There's beautiful things and there's monotonous things, but both of them work beautifully to create harmony in that state, just like nature versus nurture work beautifully to create harmony in our lives. Enjoy my conversation with Lindy Nielsen. So, Lindy, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. You grew up in Wyoming, yes?
I did. Yes, I did in northern Wyoming.
Okay, tell me a little bit about what that was like growing up.
So we lived out in the middle of nowhere. Truly, like it was only like 8 miles from the nearest little town, but even at that, the town was like 700 people. So I think it's safe to say it was the middle of nowhere. My parents are divorced, but they still live within a mile of each other, both out in the country. And so, it didn't feel isolated at the time. I have a big family, and so we just kind of hung out with each other and used our imaginations and played outside, and it was awesome, actually. I loved it.
You talking about living out in the country, was it a ranch or a ranchette or just country living?
My stepdad grew up on a large ranch, and so when I was with my mom, we were there, and so surrounded by just acres and acres of cows and things. And then my dad actually was the first in his family to move out into the country. And he had a similar, more of a farm than a ranch, but they both had a surprising amount of things in common and allowed just a lot of stability going back and forth. It was like, it wasn't one large house by any means, but it was so similar that all of my time was spent in a real outdoorsy, animal rich kind of upbringing.
I love that. That sounds ideal for a childhood, right?
It was really fun. I mean, in hindsight, I can't imagine letting my kids do the things that I did. I just didn't know that was, I didn't really get the grasp of danger or germs. I couldn't do it with my kids now. I live a very cush life now, but at the time, no one was really paying attention. So we just kind of just didn't really have rules, and we were dirty all the time, but it was really free and it was fun.
Hey, I grew up in a city and it was the same for us. Like, I think it was just a different time, right? We used to make mud pies in the backyard and yeah, you get sent out of the house after breakfast and served lunch on the back porch and you don't
Yeah.
come back in till dinner time.
Yeah, it's funny when I talk to my friends who had that experience where they would ride their bikes all over town. I didn't do that, and that seems so scary to me. But technically, I mean, playing in the river and climbing trees and, being around rusty nails in an old barn is probably scary to someone else.
For sure. You mentioned a large family. How old were you when your parents divorced?
I was 8. I think I was 8.
And did you have full siblings with them?
Yeah, so my mom was married to a really awesome man named Tom, and she had my older sister and my older brother. And then she married my dad and had me and my sister, Katie. And then then they both remarried. My stepdad had 2 kids already, and then my dad had another daughter. So between everyone, there's 7 kids now.
Wow.
Yeah. So I have a unique relationship with my one sister just because we're in both houses together.
Mhm.
But I'm really like, as an adult now, when I look back, I'm super impressed with my family because they did a really good job of being a modern family before that was really a thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't always perfect for sure, but it was definitely pretty modern for what they were dealing with at the time. There weren't like a lot of examples in their lives of just letting the door be open and everyone kind of being welcome to come and go, which is really beautiful in hindsight. I'm super grateful for that.
That's amazing. Yeah. And what's the age spread, your older siblings to your dad's youngest child?
So the oldest is 6 years older than me, and the youngest is 10 years younger than me.
Okay.
There's quite a spread.
Yeah, a little bit of it.
We did discover that I have an older sister. I just didn't know that when I was growing up. So technically that spread is even longer than that. So
Yeah, those surprise siblings, did that come up because of DNA?
it did. It was
Yeah.
fun. It was a really cool experience, actually. We did not expect it. We were looking for a different family member, and did not realize I had a biological sister on my dad's side. And so when it came up, it was really exciting for everybody.
Yeah. Did your dad know?
He did not know.
Okay. Yeah.
So he was 16, and she left town. She went to another state to have the baby. And so he didn't know. He kind of had heard rumors, but he didn't know.
Yeah.
And so it was really fun to call him. We have a screenshot of us because my sister is the one who had taken the DNA test. And when she saw the results, we called my dad, and he was asleep and he had his oxygen machine on, and he's like tearing it off of his face and just tears. And
Oh,
it was so cool. And it was also bizarre because we knew for maybe 20 minutes before we called, but as soon as my dad answered, I just reverted into being a little kid. And I was like, "We found your baby, Dad."
oh.
Just such a bizarre way of saying it, but
Yeah. Oh, wow. And so do you have a relationship with that sibling now?
we do, yes.
That's amazing. I love that. So tell me a little bit about the rest of your family. Like, did you grow up with grandparents around and aunts and uncles and cousins, or was it just mostly this really modern nuclear
Yeah.
family you had?
So actually, the extended family wise, it was pretty small. My dad is my dad had a brother who passed away when my dad was 14. And so we didn't have any cousins on his side at all. And then on my mom's side of the family, we only had 2 cousins. So there wasn't a lot of extended family. But I grew up super close to my grandmother. She had a really cool story. Her parents came from Poland and they immigrated to work in the mines. So they not together. My grandma's mom's family moved to Montana to work in the mines, and then my grandmother's father came when he was 17 to where we grew up, and he would just send money back to his mother in Poland. And so my grandma was really unique. Like, she could speak Polish, and she was just a really generous, loving human. Her parents, when they finally did meet, both being from Poland, they at a really young age realized that the mines were just really hard on your body. And so my great grandfather learned English relatively quickly. And so the court system would use him to translate.
Mm.
So they ended up getting married. He was a butcher, and they lived along the railroad tracks. And one of the things I'm like, I love is my dad tells the story about how generous they were and how he was a butcher and she would bake and they would give food to the folks that were riding on the trains past their house. And so, I mean, they had tons of stories, like stories of like someone being rude to my grandmother and the rest of the people on the train just taking care of that. I think through physical means of punching, but they just it wasn't okay for them to see them be treated poorly because they relied on them for food when they were in that section of the country. So yeah, so my grandma was really generous. Her parents were super duper generous, and that was the most influence outside of our family was my paternal grandma.
I love that. Where did she live when you were growing up in relation to you?
She lived close. She lived in a little town about 30 minutes away from us, but we would see her all the time. She was super, super joyful and just really fun loving.
Like, is there something like some memory you associate with her growing up?
Yeah, so she she was the Great Depression really influenced her. So she would tell stories about how they would have, you know, orange peels with sugar sprinkled on them, and that would be their dessert. So she overcorrected in that area, and oh, we had so many treats and like just drawers of candy. And in her freezer, I don't know if frozen yogurt was literally invented during this time of my life or if my grandma just discovered it during this time of my life. But her freezer, she would have like 30 little styrofoam containers with different kinds of froyo in them because she just thought it was so exciting. And so you'd come to her house and she'd just, open the freezer and be like, take your pick. Or she also like had multiple candy drawers. And I remember distinctly her saying, these are fat free. These are fat free. These are fat, but it was like gummy bears and cinnamon bears and like the concept of calories versus fat free. Just, I don't know that my grandma ever made the connection, but she was just like so excited about sweets and like the invention of like variety in food. I don't know. Anyway, those stories are funny to me. And she also was a real chatterbox. My grandpa called her motor, a heavy motor mouth, because she would, like, leave the room when we were watching TV, and she'd come back, like, because the phone would ring, and she'd come back, like, 30 minutes later, and we'd be like, "Who was it?" And she'd say, "Oh, it's the wrong number."
Oh,
We chat with them because she was really beloved by people. She was a operator for the phone service for AT&T, and so she would just talk to people probably all day. I mean, I didn't really know that aspect of her, but as an adult, I can see her being really successful in that because she was just always talking to strangers and making friends with people and was super generous. And
that's delightful. She sounds like somebody you just want to know.
she really was like, she had a closet full of gifts just in case. So, like, you'd be at your house and they'd be like, oh, did the neighbor just said it's his birthday. And she'd be like, I'm on it. And she'd wrap it up and then has a gift for them. And um, yeah, she just was super thoughtful and just really unique. I haven't met anyone like her since. And she was just really wonderful. I'm sure everyone says that about their grandparents, but she was so wonderful.
Yeah. How old were you when she passed?
I was 16, and actually, something interesting about finding that additional sister that we had that we have, she looks just like my grandma, and her hand gestures are like her. It's really beautiful. She's also really generous, and I don't know, some of the facial expressions she has her height. My grandma wasn't very tall, and it was really, really wild to be around our new sister because she has so many mannerisms that were so familiar. I think it was really special for my dad too, but definitely all of us kids, it was like, just this little window to this person that you miss.
You bring up this really interesting idea, though, of nature versus nurture, right? Like some things I think we just kind of come with because of our genetics, but I think some things are also shaped by our environment. And so as you think about like growing up, like you grew up in this unique family situation, you grew up in this unique cultural situation, being in this remote place, like how much do you think, and can you be objective even about like how much of that was nature versus the just environment you grew up in?
Oh, this is the million trillion dollar question.
Right?
Yes, and I mean, um, there's a very poignant example of nature versus nurture with our other DNA discovery of my niece, which I'm sure I'm jumping the gun, but
Well, let's talk about that DNA story. So your family decided to take DNA tests because you were looking for something or someone. Tell me about like
yes.
kind of what led up to that and put you all in that position and then who you were looking for and how you went about that.
Okay, perfect. So growing up with my siblings, like I said, we were largely each other's best friends. We didn't I don't know. I don't know that we picked that, but that's just how it was. And my older sister Amy, I mean, we're a pretty musical family. We got worse as we were born. So my older sister is like a phenom. She's so great. And then my brother, he is a terrific musician. He has a really successful band and he's a great writer. And then we kind of got worse as we were born. My little sisters don't love it when I say that because they're like, that's rude to us. And I'm like, oh, I mean, I'm not one of the top ones either, guys. But so my older sister, she had systemic lupus and she ended up passing away right after she turned 40.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when we were growing up, she's really musical. She had a band. She had some success with her band. And when she passed away, we were like, we should make a movie of her life because we knew that she had placed a baby for adoption when she was 25. And we were like, let's make a movie that kind of encapsulates her so that if we ever find her daughter, and this was like before DNA tests, or at least before I knew that they existed, we were like, let's capsulize the story for our kids too, for the nieces and nephews, but also in case we ever found her daughter, that would be amazing. And then we felt like there would be an infrastructure of people who might watch the movie because they liked her music. She was really great. She and her husband had a band together. And so we hired a private investigator for the movie. And the private investigator said, okay, I found her. And we did the math and we were like, she's not even 18. What if we rock her whole world right now because she doesn't know she's adopted? It became being faced with the reality of thinking that we had access to her. We just instantly, it felt really yucky inside. So we decided that we would take a DNA test because if we matched with her, it would mean that she knew she was adopted most likely and that she was looking for us. And it was right before Christmas. And we did the math on the delivery for all of the siblings. And we're like, ooh, the first person who can get a DNA kit delivered to them. Well, I had already had mine with Ancestry, and she hadn't done that one. So we're like, maybe we should do the other ones in case she's taken a different one so we can, find her. And so the fastest kit could get to my little sister in Montana. So we had it sent to her. And then that's how we found the older sister a couple of months later, which really threw us off for a while.
You're like, I'm looking for this, and we found something totally unexpected.
Yeah, and that process was so beautiful, but what we learned from that process is it's really delicate. I mean, I think on some level we knew that, but that was so emotionally delicate because we didn't want to like step on her toes or make her feel like, she owed us anything, or we didn't even want to take her like emotional energy. Like being an adult is hard, having a family is hard. And so she was so gracious and has been so gracious through the whole thing of just being so loving to us from the second she met us. She's really loving to my dad and my stepmom. She's incredible. That said, though, we learned a lot from her in terms of pacing and letting her take the lead and trying to not be overbearing, things like that. And so that's happening at the same time that we're making this movie. And then we're like, should we reach out to this baby that that the private investigator says that they're sure that this is her. And my little sister and I did some deep dives on who the private investigator picked. And we're like, I don't really feel like it's this person. But my little sister said, I think it's this person. I saw them on the internet and she plays the piano and look at her hands. And my sister sent me a video of her hands playing on the piano. Which is such a little thing, but it was so powerful. Because we're like, that is totally her hands. But I hadn't even considered that the baby she placed for adoption, this little girl, that she would be a musician. And I don't know why I didn't think about that, because that was the obvious like quality that she could potentially get genetically from my sister. But I didn't even think about it until I was watching this clip of this girl performing at 16 in front of the London Orchestra, and she was so good. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if this is wishful thinking that, that it's this beautiful, happy, well-rounded looking person. And I don't know if it's just because I think I had this grandiose view of the talent of my sister, but I don't think that I'm delusional. I think my sister was really talented. And then I'm looking at this human who's just like so pure light and just so beautiful and so great. So my little sister's like, it's her. So for 2 years, we followed her on social media and we listened to her on Spotify. But we would also say to each other, why are we falling in love with someone that's not her? On Instagram once, I went to write her adoptive mom a letter, and I wrote this big long thing. I felt like I finally had learned enough from meeting our older sister through the process to like let her set the pace. I tried to write it in a way that wasn't like, I don't know, overbearing, or it was also a really weird cold email to send in case her daughter wasn't her biological daughter. So I went to go write it and I went to push send and I just had like the most sinking, horrible feeling ever. And I'm like, I don't know why, because it's well written. Just kidding. But I was like, I don't know why this feels so bad. And so my sister and my brother and I talked and we're like, let's just wait. And so we would set like a 6-month goal to revisit in 6 months. We're like, don't spend any emotional energy, but in 6 months we'll revisit it. And maybe in the meantime, she'll do a DNA test and she'll find us.
And how old was she by this time?
Probably 20, 21.
And so you'd been following her for 3 or 4 years at this point, or?
Probably 2 years. The clips that I saw, she was really.
Got it.
We'd been following her for a few years, but still, it seemed like, we always knew her name, and we always knew what month she was born and where she was born, and she was a character in our lives. She just didn't have that face of this person that we had been following. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so common in situations where the family feels like this person is a part of their family because they've always known about them. And you don't know what the person on the other end knows or doesn't know, right?
Yeah, that's complicated because that is, yes, we had time to like acclimate to those types of concepts. So it was my mom's birthday in 2003, June 13th, 2003. And it was like 2:00 in the morning and my phone went off and I saw the like lead in to the message and it said, McKenna Bradholt, her name. And like instantly, I didn't even have to read the rest. I realized that she found us but the message says, I think I'm your sister, Amy Ross's daughter. I was like, well, I think you are too. So it was wild because I wrote her right back and didn't really spell check or anything, which threw all my previous lessons of pacing out the window. But then she wrote right back and we FaceTimed like a couple
immediately.
And she was, it's impossible to describe, but her hair was messy and she was making some food. And I was on speaker or FaceTime and she was not even like, she wasn't nervous. And it was like we had known each other forever. And she was like just quirky in all the same ways of my sister. Which I realize there are two gene pools for her genetics, but I don't see the other persons because I can only see my sisters. So she FaceTimed with us and then it's just been a really wild ride ever since then.
That's amazing. I love that. So as you're thinking about like that first conversation, did she share information about what she knew or didn't know or why she'd taken the DNA test and where she was at in her life?
Yes. So actually, she hadn't taken a DNA test. It's kind of it's really cool. There's so many cool things about it. So when my sister was placing her baby for adoption, it was a closed adoption. And the sonograph person forgot to cut my sister's last name off of some picture of the baby. So McKenna, my niece, her adoptive parents, they knew my sister's full name the whole time. And they both like looked at each other when they saw it. And then they looked her up online, and it was before really social media had much of a presence, but they were able to identify my sister. They also met her in person once and exchanged letters and things like that. So they knew what she looked like, and they matched her up with whatever social media site or news article or something. So they had kept tabs on her throughout the years, waiting to tell McKenna about her birth mom if she asked. McKenna's parents are so incredible and so loving, and like it's just such a good example of being a good parent. When McKenna was older, I think she asked them to tell her about her birth mom. And so they said, okay, well, her name's Amy Lopez, and she's a musician, and she passed away in 2013. But here are all these pictures of her performing like 2 hours away from where McKenna lived, because that's where my sister lived. And she tells the story that she instantly knew where her talent came from, or where her ability to play the piano and her ear and all of those things came from, which is really beautiful. But I think seeing the fearlessness of my sister, I think it might have added to a feeling of like, I can do anything. Like, it's like knowing how to fly, to be as I don't know, equipped with, actually, maybe not even to be as talented as that, but instead to just have it be so fulfilling. Like, Mahina breathes in and out like my sister did, which is just like music. Amy was like the soundtrack of my whole growing up. She was always playing the piano in the background, playing for us. Like, even if we weren't even paying attention, just like there's this like soundtrack that was always going. And it's because she loved it. It's because, I don't even know if it was just part of who she was. And I see that so much in her biological daughter, McKenna. It's really, really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So from the time you had that first FaceTime conversation with McKenna, like, did you continue to have conversations? Was she following you back on social media? Like,
Well,
what did that look like?
It took a hot second to admit how creepy we had been. Being like, "Oh, I know that song," and then no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, she would FaceTime. Like, we started FaceTiming, not like a ton, but like, well, it was a ton compared to going your whole life without ever talking to her. It was like every other week we would FaceTime, and it just was really natural. I don't even know where to start with all the things that she has in common. Like, her mom would interject and say, like, was your sister's car always messy? Because this girl's car is always trashed and none of our cars are messy. Or she would say, like, what was your sister's eating plan like? And honestly, my sister was a person who would eat like Conoco hot dogs, and like the grossest of the gross. Like, it's one thing. I love a good fast food, but she had like the grossest fast food that there was. Like those eggs in the store that have been floating up. Yeah. And so McKenna also is a little bit of a junk food gal. And her mom was like, she puts ranch on chips. And we were like, oh yeah, that checks out. So that stuff is super fun, and it keeps going. Like, sometimes she'll say stuff that is like just when I need to hear it, and it's almost like eerie. I know that makes me sound crazy, and I'd love McKenna for who she is. It's not because of the fact that she reminds me of Amy, but I can't help but notice there's some things about her that just seem so magical, that reaffirm my faith that I don't know, that my sister's like aware of us reuniting and aware of our ongoing relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. So you and your siblings had made this movie about Amy's life. At what point did you have an opportunity to share that with McKenna?
Well, so it wasn't long after she wrote to us. So when my sister and her husband were in a band together, mentioned that they were in a band. They had some friends and slash fans who, one of them is he's a famous comedian. And so McKenna had found my sister through him, because he kind of brought in their story into his books and some of his stand-up and things, because it was impactful for him. And so, he processes that in his own dark comedian type of way. But she was able to see when she did a Google search for my sister's name, that's what comes up. And so she was able to, through his website, get my contact information. So it wasn't long after that we showed her the movie that we had helped with. And yeah, it was really, it was exactly what we wanted, in that it's something capsulated, that it's like, don't take our word for it. Here's all these interviews from other people, I think it was a unique thing, probably to be adopted, and then to see all this footage of your biological mom talking to the camera was probably a pretty unique thing, and seems like part of a divine plan that started long before my sister passed away. Just yet another little thing that doesn't feel like a coincidence. So
I love that. So, did your family have the opportunity to meet McKenna in person? Like, what did that look like?
yes, we did. So we had planned to meet for Thanksgiving. I don't even know what year, 2024. And so we had planned to get together for Thanksgiving, but then in the early fall, we got a call from American Idol that she had been doing all of her pre-auditions, and that they were going to feature her audition on American Idol. And they asked if we wanted to fly ourselves there and be there when she auditioned, and we were like, yes. So it was only a month before we were supposed to get together anyway, but we were kind of in cahoots with her parents, and we kind of figured out the logistics. So it was in Nashville, and we got to Nashville early, and we hung out with her parents, which she didn't know. And it was really fun to have her call and say, "Where are you guys?" And they said, "Well, we're shopping for, whatever." But really they were hanging out with us. So it was fun. We had a little bit of time with them. And then the day of the shoot was so surreal, because it was so surreal that I wasn't even nervous to be on national TV. And in fact, in hindsight, we probably all could have dressed better and acted better. We were like so focused on meeting her that we just didn't really think about the fact that that was going to be viewed on national TV. So, but it's okay. I'm glad. I wouldn't change it. But we were huddled up in this little room, and then they were just kind of herding us around where they didn't think she could see us. And then when she went in for the audition, you could hear her playing the music, and they were miking us up, and just hearing her play, we were like all stunned. We had made a plan kind of what we would say if Ryan Seacrest talked to us at the very last minute. We're like, okay, well, let's not all say the same thing, because there was 4 of us. We're like, if, mom, here's your talking point. Here's your talking point. So that we're not all chaotic, because there's a lot of us, and we have a lot of excitement. And clearly from this interaction with you, you know that I'm a little bit motor too. And so we had a plan. And then as soon as we walked into this like lobby area where she was on the other side of the closed doors, and we could hear her playing, every intelligible word just left my mind. She's so good. Hearing her live is just so different and so magical. And yeah, it was incredible. So they told us she's going to open this door. No. They said, we're going to open this door, and then you're going to go to the other side of the stage. But then their wires were crossed. So all of a sudden she opens the door, and she's right in front of me. And I had this thought of like, if I stand super still and she's never seen me in real life, she won't notice, but she did. It was a panicked moment, but it was so beautiful. And her reaction is so genuine. Like, she truly did not know that we were going to be there. It was really beautiful. It was overwhelming. And like I said, we were so excited to see her. Whereas logically before I was like, oh, I love, Lionel Richie. That's going to be so fun. I'm going to wave to Lionel Richie. And at one point I remember making eye contact with Lionel Richie, and he was so warm and making a really nice face. And I literally consciously remember being like, I don't know, just like turning away from him to stare at her, because she was like the celebrity in the room, and just so captivating. I don't know. She is super magical.
So what's the rest of the American Idol story? How did she do? Because I don't think I watched that season.
Oh, well, you should watch that season. I want to say she was the last to leave. She kept making it week by week. So the audition itself, they brought us in to tell her that she had made the audition. Then they asked her if she knew any of Amy's songs. So she started playing one of her songs in the film. Yes, and it was really emotional. And then also just sometimes I I'll hear her interviews about Amy, and there's just perfect. Like on American Idol, she says, she was a wild child. She was a cool girl. And just hearing her describe her like that is so nice and sweet and so and accurate. And so pretty much every single week she would tell some Amy story. So national television, like when my sister passed away, we were so devastated because she died in the hospital of a blood infection and that had damaged her heart valves. And she was such a force to be reckoned with that even though we knew that she had failing health, it just was not on the table that she would pass away. That's just not something that we were prepared for. Even though in hindsight, we looked like the dumb ones to not have mentally prepared for that because all signs were pointing to that. It was unfathomable. And so she passed away, and then her beloved husband, who was like, in our family for over a decade, and he was a brother and family member to all of us, he was super heartbroken and sleep deprived, and he made the decision to take his life that day as well. And so the combination of the loss of those two, we were just stunned for a long time. We never really did a funeral that we were proud of or had a memorial. And it always felt like we had just let their memory down. And so for years, just feeling like, and we should have done more. So cut to her daughter being on American Idol, singing her songs, having her mannerisms, her glowing like spirit. It was such a tribute to our sister and my brother-in-law that we just sat back and were like, of course this is how it goes. Like, it wasn't in our imagination that they were so special. It wasn't in our imagination that they were so talented. And McKenna did that out of her own, like, heart. I don't know. She paid tribute to her parents as well, but like they showed videos of my sister singing and talking and candids of her, and it said, her name and her birth year and her death year and like things like that that you would have done at a funeral, and it's on national TV. And I think it was so healing, not only for us, but like classmates of hers, like people that you forget about over the years that you just, you don't prioritize how they mourn or how they miss someone. And they just came out of nowhere to be like, I don't know, just to feel so comforted and be a part of this like really beautiful story because yeah. And I think just this is a little thing, but being able to vote for McKenna, like, okay, everybody vote for McKenna. I think it gave people who missed my sister and her husband an outlet to do something to help. And not that McKenna needed it because I would have voted for her anyway. But I think giving people an opportunity to be involved, it just breathed new life into all those people from Wyoming that were in this rural town who believed in this talented gal, and then this tragic thing happened, and all of a sudden they're watching national TV and there's someone with her characteristics and mannerisms that is winning week after week, getting to stay. It was really fun. It was like the most fun sport ever.
What a fun, introduction to her as a person. Like, you kind of had this established relationship via, FaceTime and that level of communication, but to be able to, then really lean into that experience. So you mentioned that McKenna sang one of Amy's songs on American Idol. Does that song have any particular special, why did she pick that song? Was there something about it?
So in probably 2002, Amy and I and Jeremy, my husband, wrote a song called Tumbleweed, and she was going to put it on her album years later. In 2006, she called and said, hey, I am registering my album with BMI, which is not something she had typically done because she wasn't the most, she didn't care about that kind of stuff. Not to say she wasn't responsible, but she kind of wasn't. She was just a free spirit. And to register an album was just not really something she had ever done up until this point. But she said, I have registered this album, but I'm not going to. So in 2006, Amy was registering her album, Children of Fortune, she and her husband, Eric. And she called and said, we've written a couple songs because she and I had worked on a couple of the songs together. And she said, I'm going to register this album, but I'm not going to register Tumbleweed. And so just to clarify, she's going to register the whole album, even the one that's called Lindy Mindy that we definitely wrote together. She says, I already registered for that, but I'm not going to register for Tumbleweed. You need to log in and make an account. This is 2006. And you need to log in and make an account in case something ever happens with that song.
That's so random.
So then she releases that album and she does a couple radio shows. Thank goodness. There's a radio interview where they say, tell us about Tumbleweed. And my brother-in-law says, well, everyone loves the song on the album that we didn't write. Lindy and her sister wrote it. And it's the whole thing, luckily, with their voices, because it sounds like I'm making it up because it's so surreal and it makes me cry every time. So I was negligent for a while and didn't register it. And she just kept calling and saying, you and Jeremy need to make a BMI account and you need to register that song in case something happens with it. So we did. And so Amy recorded it and it's known as her song because it was, and she literally helped write it. But she, I don't know why McKenna picked that song because she didn't know that at the time that she started playing it on national TV, that she picked that song to play.
Wow. And does that, so I haven't heard it. I'm going to have to go listen to it. Is it connected to Wyoming at all?
It is. Oh,
I mean, with the name like Tumbleweed, I assumed.
Or it is definitely about Wyoming and about just, it talks about red dirt caves and it's, it is a song about Wyoming.
I love that you're sharing the things about your sister that McKenna reminded you of, but to also get to know her as a person and that level of confidence and all of the things that make her uniquely her as well.
Yes, definitely. Even just every week they do a little intro, and seeing the insight that she was feeling going into each, competition was really interesting. And then, like I said, the grace that she showed, she did not have to keep centering Amy's story, but she did. And really, we were like, okay, you don't have to do that anymore. And she's like, no, this isn't coming, this isn't for you guys. This is how this is from me. That was really beautiful. And truly, I could never have imagined any of this happening the way that it did. We're lucky to even have found her, like I said, and then realize that she's a musician was also really exciting. But then also, what are the chances of having someone who's just so loving and has so much gratitude and appreciation and so graceful? Like, I don't take that for granted at all because that didn't have to be the case. Statistically, it's probably unlikely that it would be.
Yeah. Yeah. So even though she didn't win American Idol, has she gone on to continue in her music career, I would hope?
She has. Yeah, she has. And the other thing that's similar, like one of the struggles with Amy that people had, like my sister Amy had some really great opportunities. And then people would, the producers or whoever would say, you don't want it bad enough. And she'd say, no, I think you're right. I love my little life and I just want to play here or I want to play there. I'm not hungry to be something big or whatever. I think McKenna has that hunger, but I also think she's super just a well-rounded person who is making the music fit into her lifestyle in the way that she wants it to, which is a super cool thing to watch. She's super powerful. She's a powerful person. She just released a single that is one of Amy's songs that Amy recorded and did. And then I think she's moments away from releasing her album.
I love this whole story about McKenna, but it's also just a story of several generations, right? Like you and Amy are who you are because of the place you were raised and the people who raised you. And you're a mom and you're raising children now in that same place. And I'm just curious to know, as you think about your girls and how you're raising them and how you're being a bridge to memories of Amy or memories of your grandma, what that looks like with you and your girls.
That is a really beautiful sentiment and thought, because they are no doubt pretty intertwined. I think that one of the things that a smaller paced, small town provides that I experienced, that Amy experienced, and that the girls experience is it's fun to be a a bigger fish in a little pond, or maybe not even big, but just the sense of self that can come from being surrounded by people who know you. They see it as contributing to their community to do something fun and cool, and I think that helps their confidence, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
I think, my girls play music and do music, and it is that is such a broad interest area that regardless of what your skill set is, it can bring, like, fulfillment and happiness to you, and then also just, like, provide some enriching things for your community, and I see them doing that. Like, my girls are super involved in this little town that we live in the arts, and, um, yeah, I don't know, I think you make a good point of just generations of people who I have a unique scenario in that we're all singing the same songs, right? That Amy sang, that my mom sang to Amy, that, there is some generational pieces that through music we all have in common.
I love this idea of no matter how small the town is that you grow up in, that the community that you create, and for you, that community started with this family, right, becomes the foundation for the rest of your life. And I love that Wyoming is a place where, I mean, there's not really any big cities in Wyoming.
It really isn't.
Right? Like every place is a small town, and some just happen to be much smaller than others. But it allows you to really dig into those relationships and build them in such a way, because you can't just, you know, ignore those friends at school and find new friends, because this is what you've got.
It is true. It is true. And with the death of Amy and her husband, one of the things that was really beautiful in that is realizing that I'm just a compilation of all the people I've met, and them coming out of the woodworks to be like, you know, provide some comfort was really beautiful in a really sad time. And then hearing from the people that missed Amy really meant something to me. Like, because what else are we except how we've impacted other people when we're alive? I think the big takeaway is, and McKenna says it all the time, having more people care about you and love you and be part of your family is just such a beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful that McKenna and her family are open to that, because there's so many of us siblings and our kids and my mom and my dad and my stepmom. I mean, like, that have all this love, and now we have like another person to share it with, which is really fun.
I love that. Well, Lindy, thank you again so much. Thank you for sharing McKenna with us and that story, but also just thank you for sharing your heart and sharing Wyoming with us too.
Well, thanks for asking. Wyoming deserves it.
I love that you're so connected to that place, but I think I love even more that you're so connected to your family.
Well, that's a really beautiful thing to say. Thank you so much for having me.
Studio sponsored by Ancestry.